Welcome to Murder with the Missus. I'm Darren.
And I'm Amy, and today we're going to tell you about Alan Abrahamson.
Don't forget to check us out on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Podbean, and Facebook. Like, share, subscribe. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you get the new episodes whenever they drop, and tell your friends as always.
This one's going to be a little bit of a shorter one. We do a lot of cases where investigators say someone committed suicide, but everybody else can see that it was murder. But what if that was flipped? That's what we're going to talk about today. 71-year-old Alan was living in Florida with the love of his life, his wife Linda. It was said he was well-loved, known for his extraordinary smile, contagious laugh, and the twinkle in his eye. He worked for a Washington state-based LED lighting company and owned a $900,000 5,000 square foot home inside the gates of the Fallon Isles Country Club. And this is in Palm Beach Gardens, Florida, and was walking distance to the ocean. He had no known enemies. He was an avid golfer. He liked to travel and had a zest for life. He had children, stepchildren, and step-grandchildren. He had no major medical issues. So it sounds like they were doing pretty good. In January of 2018, Alan and Linda were in Massachusetts visiting Linda's daughter. Alan came home after a week, but Linda stayed. Alan didn't want to stay because he was tired of the cold. He was used to that Florida weather and was ready to get back to it. He told them he would come back on the 28th, and just before 7 a.m. on January 25th of 2018, a dog jumped off a golf cart and ran over to something. It was Alan's body, lying on his back, feet pointed east towards the Atlantic Ocean and arms to his side. He was in a field near a walking path, maybe 300 feet past the security gate. Detectives arrived at 9:30 a.m. There was a single gunshot wound in his chest. His watch was missing. There were no shell casings or murder weapon found at the scene. Linda said he carried anywhere from $200 to $300 with him, but the clip he carried that in was empty. He did have a pair of small scissors on him.
Linda told police that Alan was probably going to meet a friend at the Starbucks that morning.
Yeah, he had started a routine of walking every morning down to get coffee. That morning, he was supposed to meet his friend Victor. And Victor described Alan as someone everyone would gravitate to, a fun guy that everyone wanted to be around. But he never showed up for coffee that morning. They pulled surveillance at the country club and see that at 5:42 a.m., Alan left his house wearing a long-sleeved sweatshirt, blue ball cap, shorts, and sneakers with something in his hand. At 5:53 a.m., he walked out of the security camera's sight at the north entrance to the gated community. Then at 6:30, you can hear a gunshot. They start looking for suspects and trying to figure out what happened in that 37 minutes. An investigator wrote, "I later walked the same route, exiting around the guard gate and then back onto the sidewalk to the location where Abrahamson was located. It took me approximately 4 minutes, 3 seconds at a normal walking pace." So they offered a $3,000 reward that his friends chipped in and raised the amount of so that, it would help bring in any tips that they could get. The owner of the company that Alan worked for said that he talked to him a few days before his death, and Alan was optimistic about a business opportunity coming up. They questioned Linda, the biological children, including his estranged son. They stopped and questioned commuters near the country club who would have been out early to see if they may have seen anything. They canvassed homeless shelters and looked into the possibility of this being a robbery. The autopsy showed only one hole and one bullet, which had mushroomed into 6 points where it entered his body, hitting his heart and lungs and breaking a rib. His death was ruled a homicide. While looking through his phone, they could see his routine morning walks on his Google Map history, so they confirmed that's likely what he was doing that morning.
But then they find an email confirming his purchase of a weather balloon on Christmas Day of 2017 from High Altitude Science.
Yep, and no one was able to explain that. He had also bought a smaller one in October of 2017 from a store in Tampa, Florida. He didn't have an interest in aerial photography or meteorology. So why would he need a weather balloon? Then they see that on January 4th, he sent an email to High Altitude saying, "I understand how the balloon lift calculator works. My question is, at sea level, what is the maximum cubic feet of helium Will a 350 gram balloon accept without bursting? I have an 80 cubic foot tank. Can I empty it without bursting the balloon? If so, with an 800 gram load, what will the burst altitude be? Thank you, Alan. So he was definitely planning on launching that thing. On January 23rd, he had went to Airgas in West Palm Beach and spent $189.86 for a 40 cubic foot helium tank. He then purchased another helium tank the next day at a different store, and he paid cash for both of these purchases. Now in February, detectives started thinking that maybe this wasn't a homicide after all. Maybe they should start looking into this as being a suicide, theorizing that he could have filled the balloon with helium, tied the gun to a string attached to the balloon, and once the shot was fired, the balloon carried it away. They saw in his search history that as far back as 2009, he had searched suicide, how to commit suicide, balloon, gun, helium, and ammunition. In 2012, he searched life insurance suicide. March 2006, he searched undetectable suicide methods. March 2016, he searched undetectable suicide methods. February of 2017, how quickly do you die when shot in the heart? August of 2017, how many cubic feet of helium do you need to raise 1 pound? He looked up nearby helium suppliers on January 23rd, and his last search was on the 24th for dusk and dawn times.
Most insurance companies won't pay out due to a suicide clause for the first 2 years.
Right. So with all these searches, it's clear that he's looking up if he gets shot in the heart, how quickly can he die, and then all the information about how to launch that balloon or other possible ways to commit suicide. So while the motive is not clear, it is clear that he was making efforts to make this look like a murder. And he had multiple insurance policies on him. They went back to the field in February, and now that they were looking at this in a different way, they found some new things. They found pieces of string and colored rubber bands about 40 yards away from where his body was found. At his home, they found a roll of white string and colored rubber bands in his office desk. The crime scene investigator said his sweatshirt had a large blood stain on the upper left side with a hole in the center. On the outside of the sweatshirt was a long, thin, linear stain that traveled from inside the circular stain to the top left side of the sweatshirt, possibly indicating that something was in blood and dragged to the top of the shirt, like maybe a string from that balloon. Allen had also emailed the founder of High Altitude Science in the fall of 2017, asking a series of questions about launching a 600-gram weather balloon. The owner had recently launched a 600-gram water balloon in Huntsville, Alabama. What did I do? I said it again.
That's a big-ass fucking water balloon. Somebody gonna get soaked.
My bad. The owner had recently launched a 600-gram weather balloon in Huntsville, Alabama, and it burst 18 hours later in the Atlantic Ocean off the New Jersey coast. So he had been doing his homework.
Detectives called nearby airports and TV traffic reporters to see if they had seen a weather balloon that morning, and they had not.
Right. So if he did use the balloon, why didn't any of the radars or anything catch it?
Maybe he was in an area where it wouldn't have. Because, they have there's like such things as like blind spots.
There are. Yeah, there are.
So maybe it was in like a blind spot?
Well, they would have known, like, because they go through the whole thing of looking at the trajectory of where it would have went.
Yeah.
So
that's my theory. I'm thinking that maybe it was in a blind spot.
Okay.
So
they got with the experts who said with the windy weather conditions that day, that weather balloon would have likely made it to land in the ocean just north of the Bahamas. His daughter wrote an article for Today last year and said that the last time she talked to her dad, he said his life was like adult spring break. She never thought suicide was a possibility as a cause of death. He liked to play blackjack, so she thought that maybe he owed somebody a debt. He was cocky, so maybe he tried to fight off a mugger. Suicide never came into mind until the police told her 6 weeks after his death that it was self-inflicted. Once the news of this case caught national attention, People were actually emailing her, angry that an innocent person could have gone to jail for her dad's murder. How is that her fault? People never cease to amaze me. Some people aren't fully convinced that this was a suicide. The gun, balloon, helium tanks, none of that was ever found. He owned his own house, so it didn't seem like he was in deep debt. He even had a scheduled tea time with the golf course at 12:30 that day as part of a foursome, according to the case supplemental report. So that is why when we cover some of these cases and they always say that person couldn't have committed suicide because they were making plans, I always try to reiterate that that is not a guarantee. Decisions can always be made at the snap of a finger.
While investigating, they discovered that there was another similar case in 2008 and a CSI episode from 2003.
Now,
caught on TV.
Yeah. And so the CSI episode was similar, but we're going to talk about the 2008 real-life case in New Mexico. On March 15th of 2008, a couple driving along US 84 saw a body on the side of the road and called 911. This was a man whose mouth was duct taped shut, suggesting he had been abducted. He had a single gunshot wound to the back of his head, making it look like an execution. There was a Jeep Cherokee Laredo at the scene that another witness reported seeing there when they came by at 4:30 a.m. on that day. So they ran the license plate and found out it belonged to 55-year-old Thomas Hickman. Thomas started as a manager trainee for Red Lobster, and in 1977 was promoted to general manager and then head of operations at locations in Wisconsin, Illinois, North Carolina, and Florida. Then he became director of operations in 2003, where he took over restaurants in parts of Texas. He was known to open the restaurant to the homeless and the elderly on holidays. He volunteered the restaurants to cook for the Brothers Keeper Soup Kitchen once a week. He had been in a business meeting in Abilene, Texas, and some others attending the meeting said that they were going to meet up later, but Thomas didn't show up, and that's when he was reported missing. Thomas was known as a non-confrontational, gentle giant because he was like 6 foot 6 inches tall and around 260 pounds. He had been married to his wife Lisa for almost 30 years, and they helped launch the Cafe on the Rock, a Christian youth ministry, and they had an adult son named Matthew. Everyone said he had no enemies, just like they said about Alan. The medical examiner did determine that Thomas's cause of death was a single gunshot wound to the back of the head fired at close range. Thomas's wallet and credit cards were found in his car, and the only fingerprints were his. But there was one thing at the crime scene that really stuck out to the police.
About 10 yards from the body, tangled up on a cactus, was a handgun tethered to several helium balloons, not a weather balloon.
Or a water balloon.
Or a water balloon. Some were still inflated.
Yeah, so some of them popped.
So he shot himself.
In the back of the head.
In the back of the head. The wind picked up. Cactus grabbed a hold of it.
It sure did. And that was similar to the one that was on the CSI episode. I haven't seen the episode, but the description of it is the same, that they had found that one several way further away than this one was, but the same thing had happened. It got caught on something. And this one was only 10 yards from his body.
I mean, it's like, damn the luck.
Damn the luck. Yeah.
Trying to do something.
Mm-hmm.
And then that happens.
And got thwarted.
And it was like, at that point, nothing he can do about it.
No. And they pulled his bank records and credit card activity that showed he made a purchase at a gas station in Sweetwater, Texas. The surveillance footage from that store didn't show anything suspicious. His financial records did, however, show that he was about $60,000 in debt. He had recently lost some money in the stock market, and this was a big stressor. Also, his wife Lisa had been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis in 2003, so there were medical stress issues as well. Thomas had scheduled a meeting with a manager that he was going to fire. And before you ask, no, that person was not near New Mexico at the time. But that shows that there was also work stress. Now the gun. Thomas had bought the Smith & Wesson Airweight in January of 2008. The grip and trigger had been filed off, likely in an attempt to make the gun lighter. Searching his home, they found metal shavings on a workbench in his garage that were a near perfect match to the gun. He had also visited a store a month before his death that sold helium balloons. He had left letters to his wife and son, Each came with instructions on what to do if he were to die, including how to handle debt and use the money from his life insurance policy. His letter to Matthew told him he'd be watching over him no matter what. So they determined that Thomas drove until he ran out of gas, tied the balloons to the gun, and had committed suicide so that his life insurance money could support his family.
The payout was set to be $388,000 or double if his death was accidental.
Yeah. So he was trying to make it look like a murder. So that would be an accidental death. It's not something that just happened. And Lisa wrote on thomashickman.org, "Please know that being a child of God does not make all the pain and self-doubt disappear. Being a child of God does not mean you think or act always in line with God. I wish it did. You have no idea how shattered I feel, or my own personal doubts, lack of hope, grace of joy. Maybe you do. I don't know. I do know that Tom was a man who loved his family and his God. I do not know how my shattered heart will ever heal or how I can barely live without my husband. You do not have to believe me, but Tom Hickman loved and was loved. Tom did not know how to be mean, nasty, or fight. He never held a grudge, never yelled at me or anyone else I know. He was the most humble man I have ever known, but would do anything for those he loved." And police say that if the balloons had not got caught on that cactus, this would have ended up being an unsolved homicide. Some people think that he did this solely as an attempt to help his family out by receiving his life insurance money. But some others think that he may have been trying to frame someone for his murder. But who? He didn't exactly try to set someone up. You would think that if he was trying to pin it on someone, he would have planted some clues. And since what he left was letters saying how to use the insurance money, I lean more towards the life insurance payout being the reason.
Yeah.
We've never covered cases like this. We always cover the ones that were like, this is clearly murder. Why are they calling it suicide? But this is the opposite.
I mean, it was very thought out.
Yes. Both of them.
You know, weather balloons and helium and stuff like that. Did that guy strap the helium tanks to the weather balloon along with the guns?
That would have been a lot of weight to carry.
Well, yeah, but I mean, if he was tracking out, you know, how much per pound.
That's true.
You know what I mean? He was probably trying to get rid of all evidence of, so it would be tied back to him.
That's true, because they did never find the helium tank.
Yeah. Did they pay out?
I don't know if their insurance company paid out. I know that Thomas's did.
Well, see, I mean, why not? Because, I mean, they never found anything.
That's true, but it
all
wasn't.
All they found was research.
Right. But if they ruled it a suicide like they did, that changes things.
Yeah, but I mean, couldn't really prove it, though.
Couldn't prove it wasn't either.
Just saying.
Maybe it should have been undetermined.
Well, yeah. I mean, something.
But then that puts the life insurance in limbo, doesn't it?
Or at least half.
See, that's what they did on Thomas's. They did a partial payout.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least then it would have been nothing.
That's true. But then what was his motive? Like, they're saying that he had no health problems, no enemies. He didn't have any debt that they could really find. He was calling his life spring break.
I'll tell you what, man, it's just, I've said it a lot. I mean, you know, depression and all that stuff, it has many faces.
Many faces.
You could be smiling. You have a big old smile on your face and just be the most depressed person in the world.
Most miserable person you've ever seen. Yeah.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It has many faces. You just never know.
That's very true. So if you or someone you know needs help, please call the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988, or you can text HOME to 741-741.
All right. Well, that's it for this one. Guys, please continue to like, share, subscribe. Tell your friends.
Tell your doctor.
Tell everybody. Tell everybody you know.
Tell them all.
Tell your pediatrician. All right. Till next time.
Bye.